I never thought Thanksgiving would become the day that changed everything forever, marking the beginning of a battle I never saw coming. My name is Margaret Thompson, and at 68, I believed I had seen it all. Raised a son as a single mother after my husband died in a car accident when David was 12, worked 2 jobs to put him through college, and built what I thought was an unbreakable bond with the boy who had been my whole world for over 3 decades. The autumn leaves in suburban Detroit painted our neighborhood in brilliant golden hues as I prepared my famous pumpkin pie at 4. In the morning, the same recipe my grandmother Katarzyna brought from Poland in 1952 when she arrived at Ellis Island with nothing but hope, determination, and a small leather satchel containing her most precious possessions. This recipe had been passed down through 4 generations of strong women who understood that food was love made tangible. My son David had married Jessica 3 years ago in an elaborate ceremony that cost more than I made in 2 years of teaching. And despite my countless genuine efforts to build a meaningful relationship with her, she always seemed distant, calculating, even hostile. Cold doesn't begin to describe the Arctic chill that seemed to emanate from her whenever I entered a room. But I had attributed it to generational differences. She was a successful corporate lawyer at Morrison, Klein & Associates, one of Detroit's most prestigious law firms, focused entirely on climbing the career ladder and accumulating wealth, while I was a recently retired elementary school teacher who valued family traditions, community connections, and the simple joys that money couldn't buy. As I arranged the dining room with my best china, the same delicate Lenox set with the rose pattern that I'd saved for special occasions for 30 years, purchased piece by piece during back-to-school sales, I noticed Jessica whispering urgently to David in the kitchen. Their voices carried a tension that made my stomach tighten with an inexplicable dread that something terrible was about to happen. I pretended to focus on folding the cream-colored linen napkins my mother had given me as a wedding gift 40 years ago while straining to hear their conversation over the gentle bubbling of the cranberry sauce on the stove. The house smelled absolutely wonderful. Turkey roasting with herbs from my carefully tended garden, sweet potatoes candied with brown sugar and Georgia pecans, green bean casserole made from scratch using my sister's recipe, and dinner rolls that had been rising since dawn. I had started cooking at 5 in the morning, wanting everything to be absolutely perfect for what I desperately hoped would be a healing family gathering that might finally bridge the growing gap between us. David had seemed increasingly stressed and distant lately, and I thought perhaps a traditional holiday meal filled with love and memories might help bring us all closer together, as a family should be. "Why is your mother here?" Jessica's voice was sharp and cutting, slicing through, the warm aroma of roasted turkey like a serrated knife through tender flesh. "I thought we agreed this year would be different. I thought we had a plan." My heart stopped beating for what felt like an eternity, and I had to grip the edge of the antique sideboard to steady myself. Different? What did she mean by different? What plan were they discussing without my knowledge? I had hosted Thanksgiving for our family every year since David was born 34 years ago, continuing the tradition my own mother had established decades before. This house, with its creaky hardwood floors that told stories of generations past, faded family photos covering every available wall, and rooms filled with memories of birthday parties, Christmas mornings, graduation celebrations, and quiet Sunday dinners, had always been the gathering place for holidays. Don't forget to tell us where you're watching from. And if you're enjoying this story, please like and subscribe. There's so much more drama ahead. The tension during dinner was absolutely suffocating, like a heavy woolen blanket that threatened to smother any attempt at normal conversation or familial warmth. Jessica barely looked in my direction throughout the entire meal, responding to my carefully crafted attempts at conversation with one-word answers that felt like slaps across my weathered face. David seemed caught between 2 incompatible worlds, his eyes darting nervously between his wife and me like a frightened child afraid of disappointing either parent. his usual confident demeanor completely replaced by an anxious fidgeting that broke my maternal heart into countless pieces. "The turkey is absolutely delicious, Mom. Just like always," David said, his voice strained with false cheerfulness that didn't quite mask the underlying tension crackling through the air like electricity before a storm. I noticed he was drinking wine faster than usual, refilling his crystal glass every few minutes with hands that trembled slightly whenever Jessica shot him one of her disapproving glances. His wedding ring caught the warm light from the vintage chandelier, the same ornate fixture that had illuminated countless family celebrations, graduations, and milestone moments over the decades. "Thank you, sweetheart. I used the same herb blend Grandma Rose taught me when you were just a baby, learning to walk in this very kitchen," I replied, hoping desperately to spark some warmth in the conversation, some connection to our shared history and the love that had sustained us through difficult times. "Jessica, would you like more stuffing? I added extra sage this year, just the way you mentioned you preferred it last Christmas when you actually smiled and said it reminded you of your own grandmother's recipe." "I'm fine," she answered curtly, not even glancing up from her barely touched plate where the food I had spent hours preparing with such love and desperate hope sat growing cold and forgotten. The silence stretched uncomfortably, broken only by the gentle, rhythmic ticking of the grandfather clock in the corner. The same mahogany timepiece that had marked precious moments for 3 generations of our family, witness to first steps, bedtime stories, and whispered confessions of childhood fears. I found myself remembering past Thanksgivings when the house was full of genuine laughter and warmth, when David would regale us with animated stories from school, when his friends would join us and the dining table would extend with folding chairs and mismatched place settings, but everyone felt welcome, loved, and valued as part of our extended family circle. Jessica's expensive smartphone buzzed suddenly against the polished table, and she immediately snatched it up with an eagerness that stung my heart, her perfectly made-up face lighting up in a way I hadn't witnessed all evening. "Oh, wonderful news! Yes, Mother, we'll definitely be there by 8 o'clock sharp. Tell Daddy we're looking forward to his famous brandy selection." "Where exactly are we going?" David asked, confusion and surprise evident in his voice as he set down his silver fork with a soft clink. "My parents invited us for dessert and after-dinner drinks at their country club. I told them we'd come by after we finished our obligations here." Jessica's deliberate emphasis on obligations made it sound like visiting me was an unpleasant chore she was eager to complete, a burden to be endured rather than a celebration to be savored and cherished. I felt my heart sink further into my chest, weighted down by disappointment and growing fear. "But I made your favorite apple crisp, Jessica. I remember you mentioning last year that you absolutely loved the recipe because it reminded you of your paternal grandmother's baking. I even drove to 3 different grocery stores to find the specific Honeycrisp apples you said were essential for the authentic flavor, and I hand-peeled every single one." For the first time that evening, Jessica looked directly at me with her steel-gray eyes, and what I saw in those cold depths shocked me to my very core. It wasn't just dislike or impatience. It was something much deeper and more disturbing, something that felt almost like pure disgust and contempt, as if my very presence contaminated the air she breathed and offended her sensibilities. "Actually, Margaret, I think it's time we had a completely honest conversation about some important matters," Jessica said, setting down her fork with deliberate, calculated precision. "David, tell her exactly what we discussed in detail last week." My son's face went deathly pale, all color draining from his cheeks like water from a broken vessel. He opened his mouth to speak, then closed it again, looking like a man about to deliver news of a tragic death in the family. The grandfather clock seemed to tick louder with each passing second, marking time like an ominous countdown to some terrible revelation that would change everything I thought I knew about my life. "Tell me what exactly," I whispered, though part of me desperately didn't want to know the answer, sensing instinctively that whatever was coming would shatter my world forever. David's hands trembled violently as he set down his wine glass, the delicate crystal making a sharp, jarring sound against the polished wooden table that seemed to echo through the suddenly quiet house like a gunshot. Mom, Jessica, and we've been having very long, detailed conversations about our future together, about our marriage, about starting our own family traditions, and building our own independent life without outside interference or complications. What David is trying to say in his typically diplomatic way, Jessica interrupted with the cold, ruthless precision of a seasoned prosecutor delivering closing arguments to a jury she intended to convince, is that we think it's time for you to step back completely from family gatherings and holiday celebrations. We want to host all future holidays at our house from now on. We want to create our own memories, our own traditions, without the constant interference and emotional manipulation that has characterized your involvement in our lives. The words hit me like a devastating physical blow, as if someone had struck me across the chest with tremendous, crushing force that knocked the breath from my lungs. Step back, interference, emotional manipulation. This is my home, David. This is where you grew up, where you took your very first steps holding on to that coffee table, where we celebrated every birthday with homemade cakes, every holiday with traditions passed down through generations, every milestone achievement for 34 years of your life. This is where your father and I brought you home from the hospital as a tiny, precious newborn, where we nursed you through chickenpox and countless ear infections, where we helped you with homework at this very table until you graduated valedictorian. That's exactly the problem we're trying to address, Jessica continued, her voice growing stronger and more confident with each cutting word, her lawyer instincts taking complete, merciless control of the conversation. You're far too involved in our personal lives, David's and mine. Too controlling, too possessive, too emotionally needy. David can't become the independent, confident man he needs to be, the husband I need and deserve him to be, with you constantly hovering over every single decision we make, offering unsolicited advice, and inserting yourself into situations where you simply don't belong. I looked desperately at my son, searching his familiar face for some sign that he would defend me, that he would stand up for the woman who had sacrificed everything to raise him alone, that he would explain this was all a terrible misunderstanding, that the woman I had welcomed into our family with open arms and genuine love hadn't just declared open war on everything I held dear and sacred. Instead, he avoided my pleading gaze entirely, staring at his plate as if the delicate rose pattern in the china held the answers to life's greatest mysteries and most profound questions. David, surely you don't agree with this cruel assessment, I pleaded, my voice breaking with emotion and disbelief. We've always been incredibly close, especially after your father died so suddenly. We supported each other through the darkest times, helped each other heal from that devastating loss. We were a team, a family unit that survived tragedy together. That's another serious issue we need to address, Jessica said, standing up with theatrical precision and smoothing her expensive designer dress that probably cost more than my monthly retirement income. This unhealthy emotional dependence you've deliberately created and fostered over the years. David needs to learn to stand completely on his own 2 feet as an adult man. And frankly, your constant, desperate need for attention and inappropriate involvement in our marriage is becoming a serious impediment to our happiness and success. I felt as though the solid ground beneath my feet was crumbling away, leaving me standing on the edge of a bottomless abyss. Need for attention? Inappropriate involvement? I simply wanted to have a traditional Thanksgiving dinner with my family. I wanted to continue the meaningful traditions that have brought us together and strengthened our bonds for decades, the same traditions that gave you comfort and stability after losing your father so young. And that's precisely what needs to change immediately, Jessica declared with finality. I think it would be best if you left right now. We'd like to enjoy the rest of our evening in peace, without the constant drama, emotional manipulation, and suffocating presence that has characterized every interaction we've had. The room began to spin around me as the full, devastating impact of her words sank deep into my consciousness. David, are you seriously asking me to leave my own home? The home where you grew up surrounded by love, where every room holds precious memories of our life together, where your father's spirit still lives in every photograph and every cherished object. Finally, my son looked up with tremendous effort, and I saw something in his eyes that shattered my heart into 1,000 irreparable pieces. Shame, but not shame directed at Jessica for her incredible cruelty and heartless behavior. Not shame at the way his wife was treating the woman who had devoted her entire adult life to his well-being. Shame directed squarely at me for existing, for caring deeply, for being his mother, for loving him unconditionally for 34 years through every triumph and disappointment. Maybe it would be better, Mom, just for tonight. We can discuss this whole complicated situation later when everyone's had sufficient time to cool down and think more clearly about what's best for everyone involved. I stood frozen outside my own front door like a criminal expelled from the scene of some terrible crime, my house keys trembling in my arthritic hands that had once changed this ungrateful child's diapers and packed countless lunches with love. Notes tucked inside, listening intently to voices that carried clearly through the thin walls of the old house I had called home for over 3 decades. What I heard in those next few minutes made my blood run cold and my heart pound with a mixture of absolute terror and complete disbelief at the magnitude of evil I was witnessing. Perfect timing, absolutely perfect, Jessica was saying, her voice animated and excited in a way I'd never heard before, as if she had just received the most wonderful news of her entire life. The interfering old lady is finally out of the picture completely. Now we can move forward with the comprehensive plan we've been carefully developing and refining for the past 8 months. Are you absolutely certain this elaborate scheme will work without any complications? David's voice sounded uncertain and frightened, like a child being asked to participate in something he instinctively knew was morally wrong and potentially dangerous. I mean, she's not actually showing any signs of mental decline. Everyone who knows her says she's still incredibly sharp, more intelligent and capable than most people half her age. Trust me completely, David. I've researched this extensively, using every legal resource available to me through the firm, Jessica responded with chilling confidence. Once we successfully get her declared mentally incompetent through the proper legal channels and medical documentation, we can take full power of attorney over all her financial affairs and property holdings. This house alone is worth at least $400,000 in today's inflated real estate market, and that's just the beginning of her substantial assets. Her teacher's retirement savings account has accumulated over $200,000. Her life insurance policy is worth another $150,000, and she has various investments, bonds, and certificates of deposit that she's been systematically accumulating for decades, like the prudent financial planner she's always been. It's all going to be legally ours anyway when she eventually dies, probably within the next 10 to 15 years given actuarial tables. We're simply speeding up the process and taking control while we can actually benefit from the money and enjoy it. My legs nearly gave out completely beneath me, and I had to grip the painted door frame with both hands to keep from collapsing right there on my own front porch where neighbors might see me. Mentally incompetent? Power of attorney? This wasn't about family traditions or independence or creating healthy space for their marriage. This was entirely about money, about stealing my money, about robbing me of everything I had worked and sacrificed to build over 43 years of dedicated teaching and careful financial planning. But she's clearly not incompetent in any measurable way, Jessica. Anyone who spends even 5 minutes in conversation with her can immediately see that she reads 3 challenging books every week, completes the Sunday crossword puzzle in ink, manages all her own finances with meticulous attention to detail, drives perfectly well with a spotless safety record, volunteers at the library twice a week helping children with reading difficulties. How are we going to prove something in court that simply isn't true? That's precisely where Dr. Richardson becomes essential to our success, Jessica said, and I could hear the cold satisfaction in her calculating voice. I've already had several very productive conversations with him about our situation. For the right price, and I mean a substantial 5-figure payment that will be worth every penny, he'll provide all the necessary medical documentation we need. Memory issues, declining cognitive function, inability to make sound financial decisions, dangerous lapses in judgment. It's much easier than you might think, David. Elderly people are automatically considered vulnerable by the legal system. The courts are specifically designed to protect their assets by transferring control to responsible family members before tragedy strikes. I pressed my hand harder against the doorframe, feeling rough splinters dig painfully into my palm. Dr. Richardson had been my trusted physician for 15 years. I had recommended him enthusiastically to friends and neighbors, had always felt completely comfortable discussing my most intimate health concerns with him, had trusted him with my life during several serious medical situations. This betrayal felt almost as devastating as my own son's eager participation in this elaborate criminal scheme. "And what happens if she fights back against us?" David asked, his voice getting smaller and more uncertain with each question. "You know Mom better than anyone. She's not going to just accept this lying down passively. She'll hire the best lawyers she can afford. She'll fight back with absolutely everything she has. She'll make this as difficult and public as possible." Jessica laughed with genuine amusement, a sound that chilled me to the bone and made me understand that I was dealing with someone far more dangerous and ruthless than I had ever imagined possible. "With what money exactly, David?" Legal battles are incredibly expensive, often costing hundreds of thousands of dollars, and once we successfully obtain control over her finances through the power of attorney, she'll have no choice whatsoever but to cooperate completely with our decisions. Besides, who's going to believe a confused, mentally declining, financially incompetent old woman over her loving, devoted son and his highly educated, professionally respected daughter-in-law? I'm a partner at one of the most prestigious law firms in the state. My word carries enormous weight in legal circles. If you're enjoying this shocking story, please hit that like button and subscribe for more. You won't believe what happens next. I carefully backed away from the door on unsteady legs, my heart pounding so violently I was certain they would hear it through the walls like a drum announcing my presence. My mind was racing frantically with the terrifying implications of what I'd just discovered, trying to process the magnitude of betrayal and criminality being planned against me by the two people I should have been able to trust most in this world. 43 years of teaching elementary school had taught me to think strategically and methodically under extreme pressure, to solve complex problems step by step, and right now, I needed a comprehensive plan more desperately than I had ever needed anything in my entire life. First, I drove carefully to the nearest 24-hour coffee shop, my hands shaking uncontrollably on the steering wheel as I processed the devastating magnitude of what my son and daughter-in-law were planning to do to me. Using their free Wi-Fi connection, I spent the entire night researching elder abuse laws in Michigan, federal financial fraud statutes, the legal requirements for declaring someone mentally incompetent, and the criminal penalties for conspiracy and bribery. What Jessica was planning wasn't just cruel and heartless. It was criminal on multiple serious levels that could result in federal prison sentences. Conspiracy to commit fraud, elder abuse, extortion, bribery of a medical professional, mail fraud, wire fraud. But I needed concrete, admissible evidence that would hold up in court against skilled legal professionals. The next morning, after a completely sleepless night spent planning my counterattack and researching legal strategies, I called my old friend Ruth Patterson, who had worked for 30 years as a social worker specializing in elder care and abuse cases and had, unfortunately, seen every conceivable kind of family betrayal and financial exploitation imaginable. Ruth, hypothetically speaking, if someone were systematically planning to have an elderly person declared incompetent fraudulently for financial gain, What would that criminal process typically look like from start to finish? Oh, Margaret, that's unfortunately far more common than most people realize or want to acknowledge, Ruth said, her voice heavy with the weight of experience and countless heartbreaking cases. Usually, it starts with systematically isolating the victim from their support systems, friends, other family members, neighbors, anyone who might witness and testify to their continued competence and independence. Then, the perpetrators begin creating and carefully documenting incidents of concerning behavior, often exaggerating completely normal age-related changes or even fabricating entire episodes of confusion or poor judgment. Medical professionals are sometimes bribed to provide false diagnoses, and unethical lawyers help navigate the legal system to transfer assets quickly before anyone can intervene. It's literally a billion-dollar crime that destroys families and devastates vulnerable elderly people every single day. Why are you asking such specific questions? Just curious about a case I heard about from another friend, I lied convincingly. But Ruth's detailed description matched Jessica's plan with frightening and precise accuracy. That same afternoon, I visited Dr. Patricia Wong, a highly respected geriatrician at a different medical practice who came with glowing recommendations from my neighbor, Helen. I explained that I wanted a complete and thorough cognitive assessment for my own peace of mind and future planning, without mentioning the real, urgent reason behind my request. Dr. Wong was incredibly thorough and compassionate, putting me through extensive testing that included detailed memory evaluations, complex problem-solving exercises, comprehensive questioning about my daily activities and decision-making processes, and even physical coordination tests. "Mrs. Thompson," she said after carefully reviewing all my results and comparing them to age-appropriate norms, "I want you to know that your cognitive function is not just normal for your age. It's truly exceptional in every measurable category. Your memory, reasoning abilities, problem-solving skills, and judgment are all excellent. You should feel very confident about your mental acuity and cognitive health." She provided me with comprehensive written documentation proving my mental competence in every area. But I knew that alone wouldn't be enough to stop Jessica's elaborate criminal plan. I needed to catch them in the actual act, to record their conspiracy in progress with their own words condemning them. That evening, I called David, forcing my voice to sound confused, uncertain, and slightly pathetic. "Sweetheart, I've been thinking constantly about what happened yesterday at dinner. Maybe you and Jessica are absolutely right about some things. Maybe I really am getting a bit forgetful and confused lately without realizing it myself." "Really, Mom?" David's voice contained a mixture of obvious relief and something else, guilt perhaps, or excitement that their plan was working faster and more effectively than they had expected. "Yes, I'm terribly afraid so. In fact, I had the most frightening experience today that really scared me. I went to the grocery store for just a few items and completely forgot where I had parked my car in that huge parking lot. I wandered around for over an hour, getting more and more confused and frightened before a kind stranger took pity on me and helped me find it. I felt so embarrassed and terrified about what's happening to my mind. This was completely fabricated, but I needed them to believe their plan was working perfectly, that I was already showing clear signs of the mental decline they intended to document officially. 3 days later, I sat in Dr. Richardson's familiar office with a small, high-quality digital recording device hidden securely in my purse. Perfectly legal in Michigan for protecting oneself from potential fraud and criminal activity. "Mrs. Thompson," Dr. Richardson said dismissively, barely glancing up from his computer screen as I entered his office, where I had been a trusting patient for 15 years. His manner noticeably and dramatically different from our usual warm, caring interactions that had built my confidence in his medical expertise and personal integrity. "Your son David called me several times this week and expressed some very serious concerns about your rapidly deteriorating mental state. Significant memory issues, episodes of confusion, difficulty managing basic daily tasks, problems with sound decision-making, and what he described as dangerous lapses in judgment that could put you at serious risk. "Yes, doctor," I replied carefully, playing the confused and vulnerable role Jessica expected me to perform while my hidden recording device captured every incriminating word for future legal proceedings. "I've been extremely worried about myself too. These frightening episodes of confusion are becoming much more frequent and more terrifying each time they occur. Well, based on the detailed information that David and Jessica have provided me about your recent concerning behavior patterns," he said with clinical coldness, still refusing to look at me directly or treat me with the respect due a long-term patient, "I think we need to consider some very serious medical and legal interventions for your safety and well-being. Have you given any serious thought to having someone responsible help you manage your complex finances and important legal affairs? Perhaps giving David complete power of attorney over all your financial and medical decisions?" There it was, exactly what Jessica had planned and paid for, delivered with purchased precision. Dr. Richardson hadn't even bothered to examine me properly, hadn't asked me any probing questions about my supposed symptoms, hadn't performed any cognitive tests or memory assessments, yet he was already recommending the exact legal outcome she had bought and paid for with her bribery money. "I suppose that might be the wisest course of action," I said, injecting my voice with confusion, defeat, and the kind of vulnerable uncertainty that would make their conspiracy seem justified. "But shouldn't there be some kind of formal medical evaluation first? Some comprehensive tests to accurately determine the extent and severity of my cognitive problems?" "Oh, that's really just an unnecessary formality at this point," he said dismissively with a wave of his hand, finally glancing up at me with what I now recognized as pure contempt mixed with greed. "I've known your family personally for many years, and I'm completely confident that David has your absolute best interests at heart. He's a responsible, intelligent young man with a very smart, legally educated wife who understands complex financial matters. They're much better equipped to handle complicated financial decisions and medical choices than someone in your deteriorating condition." "My condition?" I asked with genuine curiosity, wanting him to explicitly state the fraudulent diagnosis. He was prepared to document for money. "Could you be more specific about what exactly is wrong with me?" "Early-stage dementia with significant impairment in executive function and decision-making capabilities," he said matter-of-factly, as if he were diagnosing a common cold rather than condemning an innocent person to financial ruin and loss of basic human rights. "It's quite typical and unfortunately very common for someone your age, Mrs. Thompson. The important thing is to get all your legal and financial affairs properly organized while you still have brief moments of clarity and understanding." I left his office with a recording that would not only completely destroy their entire criminal scheme, but also end Dr. Richardson's medical career permanently and result in serious federal criminal charges. But I wasn't finished with my counterattack yet. I had one final, decisive move to make that would expose the full extent of their betrayal. 2 weeks later, I invited David and Jessica for what I told them would be a reconciliation dinner and important family discussion. They arrived with barely concealed excitement and anticipation, probably thinking I was finally ready to sign over my assets and submit completely to their control and manipulation. "Before we eat this wonderful meal, I've prepared," I announced with calm authority. "I have something extremely important to share with both of you that will change everything." I opened my laptop computer and pressed the play button. Jessica's voice filled the dining room with crystal-clear audio quality. "Once we successfully get her declared mentally incompetent, we can take full power of attorney over all her financial affairs and property holdings." David's face went completely ashen as the damning recording continued playing, revealing every sordid detail of their elaborate conspiracy, their criminal bribery of Dr. Richardson, their calculated plan to steal my entire life savings, and their complete lack of remorse for destroying my life and violating my fundamental human rights. Jessica lunged forward desperately, trying to grab the laptop and stop the playback, but I calmly closed it with satisfaction. The FBI's Financial Crimes Unit was extremely interested in this comprehensive recording, I announced with quiet, dignified satisfaction. Elder abuse automatically becomes a serious federal crime when it involves conspiracy, fraud, bribery, and wire communications. Dr. Richardson has already been arrested and his medical license permanently suspended, pending a full federal investigation. His complete cooperation with federal agents in exchange for a reduced sentence has been quite helpful in building an airtight case. Jessica stood up frantically, her face twisted with pure rage, desperation, and the dawning realization that her criminal scheme had completely collapsed. "You can't prove anything substantial. It's just a recording that could have been edited or manipulated." "Actually, I can prove everything beyond any reasonable doubt," I interrupted with calm confidence. "While you were busy planning to destroy my life and steal everything I worked 43 years to build, I was systematically building an absolutely airtight federal case against both of you. I have a complete cognitive assessment from Dr. Patricia Wong, proving my mental competence is excellent. I have detailed financial records showing your unauthorized attempts to access my bank accounts. I have signed witness statements from neighbors who overheard you discussing your criminal plan. And most importantly, I have Dr. Richardson's full written confession detailing exactly how much money you paid him, when you paid it, and what specific fraudulent services he agreed to provide." 6 months later, Jessica was sentenced to 3 years in federal prison for elder abuse, conspiracy to commit fraud, and bribery of a medical professional. David received 2 years probation and 500 hours of community service, working specifically with elderly victims of financial crimes. Dr. Richardson lost his medical license permanently and received 5 years in federal prison, plus substantial financial penalties. Sometimes the people who should protect us most are the ones we need protection from. But I learned that being older doesn't mean being powerless. It means being wiser, more patient, and more strategic than those who foolishly underestimate us. Thank you for watching this incredible story of betrayal and ultimate justice. Please like and subscribe for more amazing real-life tales.